Well, for 2 years, I was legislative assistant to a member of parliament who was also the chair of the Standing Committee on the Environment and Sustainable Development in the House. And that gave me a really great viewpoint for watching how legislation makes its way through the Parliament of Canada. First of all, it's recognizing that the legislative process is part of a much bigger set of institutions and processes. One is that legislation is really, for better or for worse, a subset of the policy-making process. And policy, despite what we might sometimes think, comes first. And there's a whole machinery, both inside and outside government, that is involved in making that. And so my task is often to try and figure out how all of those processes and institutions work.
So it may not be as straightforward as an outside observer might at first think it would be.
I think, like a lot of things, like how our car engine works, to take a purely literally mechanical example, there's a lot more to it. We can get in and drive, and we may assume, and quite gladly for most of us, that it just works. But how is what interests me. And I hope that ultimately helps my clients when I delve deeper.
Okay, thank you for these preliminary insights. We have one last question before I let you go on a different topic. Could you tell us about a favorite local beverage maker of yours?
I'm glad you asked that question, and I'll tell you why. Is that I like, ideally, to travel all over Canada. And so I like to have the most local, juicy, hoppy, and hazy beer that I can find that's been made close to where I happen to be. I'm particularly pleased to find that Trailway Brewing in Fredericton, New Brunswick has a beer that looks like it might be named after me, because it's called Hugh John Hops. And I just found it here in Montreal a few days ago, to my surprise, and I'm going to crack it open tonight and give it a try. I'll let you know my report.
I've been working in the environmental nonprofit sector for over 30 years now. And in Manitoba, we started a new piece of legislation called the Waste Reduction and Prevention Act. And it was like a clean slate, and all the stakeholders were invited to participate in developing that piece of legislation. So back then, I learned what legislation is and how important it is in sort of directing society and doing good things to protect the environment. I've been with other organizations since. I've been a community organizer with the Beyond Factory Farming Coalition, and also I was a co-founder of Hogwatch Manitoba. And both those organizations were heavily engaged in the legislative process in trying to make better regulations and laws to protect the environment. What I've done in the past is use the legislation there to become more involved. So, that's writing complaints to the provincial ombudsman. It's using FIPA, Freedom of Information legislation to get information to help your cause. And then, of course, one could make presentations to the Manitoba legislature when bills are presented for second reading. So numerous groups, do that sort of work to try to make a piece of law a better piece of law.
Thank you very much for these insights. Just to cap off with something a little different, could you tell us about favorite local beverage maker of yours?
Well, actually, my good friend Phil, he grows his own hops and he makes his own beer, and he's got a batch that he's recently made that, you know, makes me want to come back to his place and have a beer quite often. So my friend Phil's beer is the top beverage for me right now.
All right, shout out to Phil. Thank you very much, Glenn. I'm looking forward to the webinar.
Okay, great. Thanks.
I've been with the Mining Association Canada for 29 years, almost 3 decades. In the same job, although the job has evolved over time. Some of the things, the main things I've been working on is the various iteration of the Canadian Environmental Assessment Act, which is now the Impact Assessment Act. I've worked on the Canadian Environmental Protection Act through its reviews, Fisheries Act, and the many lives of the Navigable Waters Act. And so looking back, I want to share, okay, how would I have done it better? It is an interesting process, but it's just one little piece of the overall process of achieving some kind of progress towards the goal, whatever goal you have in mind.
Thank you very much for all of those insights. We do have one quick last question that's completely separate from all of these more serious topics. And we're just hoping to get an insight into a favorite beverage maker of yours, maybe one that's local to you.
A Bose Lug Tread all the way.
Okay.
Love Bose, and if I could also add, I actually had a Jets jersey all prepared for this promo recording, and I was so disappointed that they're out of the playoffs maybe next year.